Hello there.
There you are. Thank you
Yeah,
really
here
very
I
much
am.
for coming on.
Yeah, well, good to
Hey, listen,
happy
you're a
happy
gift.
end of the year.
It's been a rough one. I just
Oof.
want to get it. I saw you one day at Actors Studio. I came in late and from behind in New York, it was, you look just like your father right there, from behind. And I remember I was so impressed with your critique. And the actor was an asshole. I got to say that. He didn't appreciate what you were saying and he took it whatever. And
Mhm.
I till this day, and this was many, many years ago when you were there, I have to say, every time I see that actor, I have no respect for him. I won't give his name, but uh, you know, it's it's a gift to have you moderate. And when an actor's, I just don't understand it sometimes.
Well, when I was younger, at the studio when my father was there, um, and even in New York, it wasn't just my father. People wanted to get better, and they were open to positive criticism, and they wanted rigor in their work. And when I came back to New York at the end of the 90s, when my
That's what it
book was
was.
published, I'd been living in Europe. Was working as a director and I was teaching, which I still do. But um, I started a theater, the Accidental Repertory Theater, and we started with a workshop with people, and I didn't want to audition people. I had actors that I knew who were part of it, and I said, if you think someone is worth it, then you invite them, and we'll see how that develops.
Right.
And what I discovered after a while was that if people were criticized, they didn't come back, and I was absolutely shocked. I just was like, I said, "This is New York." I said, I just don't get it." And I don't know. Maybe somewhere. I know that there are serious people still on the planet, um, but the atmosphere is not what it was before. And I think it must be very hard to be a young person, because you don't have the same. We all had this artistic movement that we were looking up to, that came out of the group theater, and then Gadge, founded the Actors Studio. Then my father was there, and it just had an energy to it that I think people totally misunderstood. They thought of the studio as a school, and it wasn't. There were professional people who were just there. I mean, Paul Newman came in to work on Petruchio. And he was already famous. Jerry Page, was already known. And these people, and it was just normal to me. I just said, well, that's how you know life is, and I'm very aware that it was unique in the world. I don't think it existed anywhere else.
No, it doesn't. I had a playwright on. Robert Patrick was a playwright in New York back in the '60s. He started with La Mama and the Chino Theater,
Mm.
off Broadway.
Mm.
And he actually said when I asked him about the Actors Studio, he said, "Well, that was really professional actors, and that would come there." And then I found that he was very interested. I'm going to have him back. But you're right. I mean, one of the best advices I ever got as an actor was from Shelley Winters when she told me, "Sit down, John, you're acting." I loved
Yeah.
it. And many times, when I do work at the studio, you know, I want to know what doesn't work. Salome Jens was great with me on that,
Mm.
helping me to what doesn't work. I'm there to advance.
Mm.
Not, and if you
If
can't
you're
take
not, there's no
criticism,
point. Yeah, there's no point to be there if you're
no
not.
point.
Yeah.
And you're so right. I see it so much with even the critique today. A lot of the critique I find is, you know, they don't help the actor by just being nice.
Yeah,
I
I
always,
agree. Yeah, I
Estelle
agree.
Possum was my idol because she took no prisoners.
Mm.
No, I invited her for coffee one day and I says, Estelle, and she says to me, that doesn't mean I'll be nice to you when you get up there.
Yeah.
I love that. When I was looking up your thing, there was something I found interesting, John. You said, you know, what makes an artist? And I said to myself, why did you use the term artist instead of actor? I was wondering why that term came from.
I think it's because, you know, you asked me a question, so I always feel, well, I better give a good answer,
No,
but,
no, please.
uh, I, in the evolution of my work, I mean, I was trained by my father, who was a master teacher. Uh, and the work that he taught was extremely powerful and extremely effective. But I had a problem because I always felt that I was manipulating myself and it wasn't what I wanted to do. And when I really did what I wanted to do, I was inspired and I wasn't thinking about my technique. I was involved in the character's world. Whether I really became the character or I was just going beyond my own habits, I think I know a lot about the process, but I can't draw a line there. You know, but the more that my work evolved and became my own and my own investigation, uh, I thought that what I was dealing with was the creative process, and that the creative process was something that could be applied to anybody, and it could be, you could apply it to doing business, you could apply it to being an architect, you could apply it to being whatever. And because I thought that what happened is that I got underneath the techniques. And what everybody forgets about all the techniques is that they all came out of an observation of what great actors were doing organically. And people forget that. They think that it's invented, and it wasn't. There were exercises that were evolved, but they were evolved out of perceptions of what great actors were doing organically. And so I got to saying, well, okay, I'm dealing with the organic creative process. So to me, it is an artistic process, and it's not just, I apply it in acting, but it could be applied in many things, at least from my point of view, in terms of how I understand the process.
And you teach this now. I noticed that your classes now, they're going to be Zoom, I guess, I would imagine.
I had a live class in New York.
You did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and
Oh,
I
good for
had a
you.
I had a student who said that he thought that I was the only live class in New York, and I just said that's impossible. This is New York. I can't be the only one. I mean, obviously, I had rules. You had to be masked. I
Yes.
took everybody's temperature. I only let a certain number of people in the room. We can't ignore what we're living through. But whenever anybody had a problem, I just said, forget it. It is like working in the movies. You're going to have to deal with things. So just deal with it. And in a way, it becomes a gift. The problem becomes a gift because it forces you have to choose what you're going to focus on. Are you going to choose on everything that's preventing you from doing what you want? Or are you going to focus on what can help you to do what you want to do? And that was it. So I obviously discovered Zoom, in late March. I came back to New York. I had been in Europe. We left Milan just before it hit. We left Madrid the day after they shut the city down. We came back to New York, and we're fine, so far, excuse me while I, knock on wood, but, so far we've, every time we've been tested, we're negative and whatever. Uh, uh, but I wanted to have live classes, and you know, I just felt that if you could, you had to keep moving forward. You can't. This is. I have friends in Spain and Italy who are saying that they have friends who have given up. They've decided not to act anymore. So it's a test for people.
Wow.
People are being tested right now.
Yeah.
And I at least wanted to, not in an irrational way, but if at all possible, I wanted, I'm now going to go to Europe. Theoretically, I'm going to have live classes in Paris. I'm going to have theoretically a live class in Milan, which I did have a live class in September, and it was full. And we had the rule. It was very well organized. It was very well done. There was a limit in terms of the people and all that, but the work was, people were grateful to be there. They wanted to work.
Right.
Sometimes I'm having trouble convincing people to deal with internet, with the Zoom. And I've done a couple of, and I do script analysis, but I also do intensive workshops. And I was surprised because some of the people that I was dealing with, when there they are in their homes doing scenes with somebody who's 5,000 miles away, uh, sometimes their work was more intimate than when they were in the room with people.
Really?
And I was like, I you know I was really surprised. And I said, well, maybe it's because some of them, because they're in their home, part of this thing that you learn to prepare yourself so that you're private in public. Maybe the fact that they're in their home maybe relax them a little bit so that they could actually make more contact and be more intimate. And some of them, I said, it's going to be very interesting when you get back in the room with someone to see if you can maintain what you're doing now. And it was fascinating to me. It's like, because it's, in a way, it's a gift. I hate to say that the pandemic is a gift, but it just led me to, at the end of March, middle of April, I realized I wasn't going to have live classes. And I said, well, I better do something.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Just wait?
Yeah.
And so I started, and I find it extremely valuable. Even now, I will always have some of my classes in internet, because I've worked in a lot of countries in the world,
Yeah.
and it enables some people who can't afford to come to New York or wherever I may be, who could actually work with me. And this is a tremendous advantage. I mean, it really is. It's and it's like doing close-ups in the movies. You have to be able to focus yourself and concentrate. And this deals with your imagination. It deals with your ability to focus. So the problem is actually, I think, a gift. It just challenges people.
It was something Marty Landau always said. An actor's pain is his gift. You know, it's something.
Well, I don't know, but yeah,
There's a director at
at
the
least you
studio.
get somewhere that you can use it.
Director at the studio, Todd, who does a smartphone. Uh, I don't know if you ever watched it. You can see it on Facebook. Uh, but it's like you said, he has scenes, new plays, and some of it is really good, and it's very intimate because it's like you said, it's a close up.
Yeah, it's all close-ups. Yeah.
Like you and I are
Hmm.
doing now. There's no movement
Hmm. Hmm.
really to go around. And about that, now you have a book out called Accidentally on Purpose.
Hmm.
Can we? I love the title.
Is there any other way?
I love,
Why, if you have a method that you can guarantee inspired a brilliant work of art, please let me know what it is. It's just the best moments that you ever have, certainly the best moments I've ever had. I'm not sure who did it. I know I was there. I know I work hard. I know I'm very demanding, whatever. But when it happens, and you do what you actually dream it's all about, you this is not something that you can mechanically say, I'm going to do this at 8:15. This is one of the differences in my work and what my father did. One of the things that he wanted was that when he was young and he saw some of these great actors and he took his friends back. He told stories about taking his friend back to see Giovanni Grasso, who was this great, Italian actor. And the night that he took them to see him, Grasso wasn't on. And it was only until the middle of the second act or something that all of a sudden he was inspired. And what my father wanted was to guarantee the inspiration. He didn't put it that way, but that's what he wanted. And all the technique that he focused on, whether people like it or not, it was very powerful and it worked. But sometimes you produce emotional results, but you don't really reveal what the character is going through. It's not it, it it's not real. It's not like a human being who's living through a moment. You are producing an emotion which, and a lot of people define acting by how much emotion you can produce, as though if you produce the emotion, that's I've now revealed what the character is doing. And I don't think that's true.
I don't think so either.
I don't think it's about the emotion. I think it's about your ability to tell the truth. And you can't be the equally inspired every time you go. You may want to be, but that's, I mean, I like baseball, the greatest hitters in the world, they hit 400, so how can anyone think that you're going to, in 8 performances, that you can guarantee 8 out of 8? What you can guarantee is giving a good professional job, but the nights in which you're going to be better and be inspired, that that's not, you cannot mechanically control that. You can prepare yourself like an athlete. You can prepare to do it, but you can't. Once you say that you want to guarantee it, you're in a lot of trouble.
I worked on Gary Gilmore from the Executioner's Song. Norman Mailer wrote the book.
Mm.
I did his letters, which have never been done.
Mm.
Actual letters that Gary wrote to Nicole. I did it for years at the studio in New York and here.
Mm.
And I can honestly say I've never done it the same. And Barbara Baines got tired of me doing it. So, people got tired every time they saw me. I was doing Gary Gilmore because I found something.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I did it, I found something as an actor. It came out different.
Yeah. Well,
And
one of my favorite pianists is Glenn Gould, and who didn't perform publicly too much because he didn't like that. But people who had worked with him in a studio said that he never played the same piece twice exactly the same way. And that is what I want to do. I'm not going to change the notes. I'm not going to change the play. I'm not going to change the words. I can, but within the form that you evolve, I want it to breathe and to be different. And that's my, uh, I don't like the idea of goals, but that's, because I really think the goal is simply to live. That's my goal. It's if you want to call it that, and get the most pleasure out of life that I can, and which includes in my work. Obviously, my work is a really important part of life.
It really is. Yeah, I understand. That's me. Lately I've been working on Huey from Eugene O'Neill.
Mm.
And there too, you're right. I say the lines. I know the lines backwards and forward, but each time I do it, I find something different.
Mm-hmm.
I try not. It's not that I try not to repeat. I don't know if this is right or wrong. I always wondered about this at the studio, and I used to ask Salome Jens. I'm the type of actor, when I read something, I go with the lines, where they take me, where that takes me. I don't worry about the backstory or anything at first. I just worry about, I just feel something that happens to me with the lines, and I go with that.
Well, I think that the ideal process to me is a consciously intuitive process. If it's only intuitive, you cannot maintain it, because if you work enough, you're going to be under pressure. And if it's only intuitive, I don't think you can maintain it in the kind of pressure where you have to produce results and things like that. If it's only conscious, it can be wonderful, but it will tend to be a little cold.
Yeah.
So I want both, and that's how I work. That's what I try to, when I'm teaching, when I'm acting, that's what I'm trying to do as much as possible. And I can tell if I push myself into doing something the same way, I know I'm having a bad day.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I just, I don't know where. I think I've always been obsessed about spontaneity. When I was younger, I was extremely depressed. So it was, the only way I got spontaneous was by blowing up and getting mad. Um, so maybe some of it comes out of that. And the older I got, and the more I began to look at the process, I said, but spontaneity is a critical part of creativity. This happens, any good artist, there's moments when they're working and something is going to happen that's not exactly planned. And if you have a good technique, you can incorporate it into what you're doing. And I had friends when I was younger who were English, and they were good actors, but some of them were absolutely terrified of being inspired because they were afraid that the technique wouldn't hold up. And I wanted technique in which, when that happened, I could express how I felt. And these are just the idea of technique then is almost diametrically opposed.
Crystal,
And I
I'm
do
a thought.
think that the realistic school is like that. I think that's the choice that was made.
Yeah.
And some of the techniques, it was, I mean, Stella and my father, I mean, these were like, it was like a big family. They were just hated one another. My father said, "Well, Stella needs discipline." Stella said that my father ruined her pleasure. And but what happened is that they each one claimed that they had the method
Yeah.
that worked, and I thought that did a lot of damage to actors, because a lot of times people were arguing about the technique instead of being good actors. I mean, who cares what the technique is, really? And if you study with anybody, I studied with my father. I still use some of his work, but I don't use it like a recipe. I use some of it, in the sense memory work, which I always liked. I really liked it. One of the ways that I got myself involved was by creating where I was, because I didn't like the feeling of being on stage. So I learned that if I created a world, I would forget where I was. You don't forget. I mean, I know where I am, but the imaginary world was stronger than anything. And I really liked it, and I still do. So I still am doing that. But it is subsidiary to the basic creative process, which is the moment to moment living through a real experience. And that's what I devote myself to. And it comes down to spontaneity, because if you can't be spontaneous, you won't be able to do it.
Right.
And then I've talked to doctors, who said the definition of life is spontaneous. He said, you look in a microscope, if it's alive, it's moving. If it's not moving, it's dead. And so the older I got, I was like so proud of myself. I said, "Oh, gee, you mean intuitively I've understood this, from forever, But it is an integral part of a process. And sometimes the problem in the teaching is if it becomes too much of a recipe, you may lose that. And I think really good actors will go beyond whatever technique they're learned, because they will adapt it to themselves, and they'll take what works and they discard what doesn't work. And you can't say that everybody has to do this or this or that. You can prefer things. I like a lot of, I mean, nowadays There are thousands of people teaching sense memory,
Yes.
but I don't see a lot of actors that can do it. I don't see the work that I saw in the 50s and the 60s and whatever, where you could see that someone was capable of creating a state. You don't see that much anymore. So I think there's something wrong in the teaching. I think there's it's like they're imagining stuff in their heads. And boy, anybody who's studied with anyone who knows how to teach sense memory, it's not happening in the head. It's happening in your senses, and you have to train your senses. Your mind is involved, but life doesn't come from the mind. Life is coming from your senses and what you feel. And this was I think is a major mistake in some of the teaching that's going on. I'd love to see people where I went, oh wow, yeah, whoever's teaching them is really knows what they're doing. But unfortunately, I travel a lot, so I live in my own world in a way. I direct in Europe. I teach in 3 continents. Uh, so no one knows whether I'm alive or dead, because I'm moving around all the time. I'm a moving target. Uh, and but
You do have a point there, though. Wait, when you go back to the group theater, I'm Edward Binns was a dear friend of mine back in the 70s. I had been in prison, and when I got out, I met Ed, and he's the one that recommended me for when the execution is sung. But Ed was with the group theater, and the technique. And you're right, it's not being done. I don't see it when it's interesting. You were there in the 50s and 60s when what was it? Christopher Plummer was talking about the Actors Studio. He says back in the 50s they rehearsed suit and ties, and then all of a sudden these method actors came with T-shirts and jeans and screwed everything up. When you were talking, but
it was an artistic movement.
yes,
It's
yes,
just it wasn't that there weren't good actors before, but what I really think the realistic school, or whatever you want to call it, is about is that the work is deeply personal. And that was what marked it. And that was when people saw Marlon and they saw the Monty Clift, and they saw this work, it was different. And what was different was how deeply personal it was. And you didn't, it's not that actors weren't good before, but this was different. And
different.
this really marked the world. It still does. It's just that now everyone's imitating doing it instead of really doing
Yeah, someone was saying that Marlon Brando ruined a lot of actors.
it. Well, I don't think it's his fault.
Not his fault. No, no, I don't blame
You
him.
know,
But they were talking about how they all tried, they're mumbling and this
well,
and that. And
well, yeah, because I don't know how many teachers do. I will always, when I'm training people, I ask them, how many of you can tell the difference between being natural and being real? Because most of the work that we see that people think is real is natural. There's an absence of life in television, whatever. You just see it all over the place. And you can like it or not, but from my point of view, it tends to be a little boring. And if it's real, it's not boring because there's something actually going on. So everyone's got the attitude, but they don't have the life that's going on inside. Not everybody, but that's the mistake. People are settling for naturalism. And I sometimes when I was at the studio, and I would make a remark about it, and people would get really upset. They got really upset. I really upset people at the studio. That's why I stopped going around. It was like, I have nothing to prove. I have something to offer, and if they want me there, then they can ask me to come. But every time they would ask me to come, I would, the whole room would go up. Some of the people were really glad I was there, and other people were like upset. And I didn't think that being upset was a bad thing. and sometimes I put them in their place. I said, no, you're wrong. I'm sorry. That's not, whatever. And you have to be careful what you say to somebody, things like that. And they couldn't stand it. And I just, after a while, you know, I don't know. It was sad. It was sad to me. And luckily I've got a good career. So I just said, okay, I'm going to go off and just do what I do.
The studio did change when they started the school. Back then.
Well, it started after my father died.
Yes, too. That too.
That's, I wrote a letter to the studio after he died, in which I had the Mirror Rep at the time in New York, with Jerry Page. It was a real theater. It was a family, and it was a repertory company. And, we did some really interesting work for a few years. And I wrote a letter to the board in which I said that I thought in the evolution of the studio that the studio could have a school. Unfortunately, what they evolved was not what I think should have happened. In the same way, I'm very glad that the studio made a lot of money with, with the television program, but I think it banalized what the process was.
Mm.
It didn't illuminate some of the interviews are fascinating, but a lot of it, some of the people that are on there have no business being there.
Yeah, they weren't members of the studio.
Well, it doesn't even matter whether you're a member. It's a matter of it's a matter of understanding the process that was going on that was different. And it didn't just mean that if you're famous that you're being real. No, and therefore I thought that there was a distortion of reality. And I think that has, it's very hard. I mean, it's very hard. My father held it together. He kept everybody honest. And while I have a lot of respect for the people that are there now, who are wonderful actors and things like that, no one has been able to do what he does and did. I can do it, but I think I scare them, to be honest with you.
You do.
Partially from the name. They didn't want me around for a while just because of the name. I think if I had been mediocre, they probably would have loved to have had me around. But I'm too opinionated, I guess. I don't know what. I'm not going to say I'm too good, but I certainly was too. I see things. And you're either going to like that or not. That's just.
Well, with your background, John, I mean, you were there with the studio when it began. I mean, well, almost began. I mean, you came a little later, but I mean, you saw the work. Every time I ask Salome Jens, how do you do that? She says, I do the work. And you were there when the work was being done.
Sometimes I don't even know what I know. I don't know how I know some of it. Because I think I was just around, I just, my sister would say, you learn by osmosis, and I think that some of that is true. There is a certain amount of knowledge that is not passed through the brain. It's just, if you were in the room with my father, if you're in the room with Stella, if you were in the room with Sandy Meisner, their presence was half of what they did. That was half of what they were teaching. And when you just take their work away from them, then that work will lose something in the process. And that's just how it is. I mean, we could say that about religion. We could say it about anything. If Jesus walked into most churches nowadays, how would they treat him? It's whatever. But
one of my biggest, you wrote a book there, but I found Uta Hagen's book, A Challenge to the Actor, a very good book.
Yeah, I liked her.
The second book.
The first book, I know the first book better than the second book. But Uta was the real thing, whether you liked her or not. She was the real thing, and she was kind of almost not exactly the same generation. you know, but, and Uta, when she acted, if you got her on a good night, she was a great actress. You
Yes.
know, you got her on a night when she was a little off and it was a little too German, you know. uh, but but it was, you know, she was just, you know, she had something to say.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a few people that I would say, if you can study with them, study with them. It doesn't matter whether you like them or not. They have something to teach.
That's
You
it.
know, most people, I will say, if you don't like them, you won't be able to learn much from them. You know, but some people are go beyond that, and they have something which is just sit in the room and learn something.
Yeah.
You know,
I
it's
also know you have you're working on a film about Marilyn Monroe.
no, that's
Oh,
actually a book.
a book? Oh, it's a book.
It's a book.
Oh,
Yeah. No, a film. No, I wouldn't. You know, that would be like making a film about my family. I have absolutely no desire to do that.
yeah.
You know, my sister said
Susan.
to me, Johnny, you know, you chose to be born in this family. And I said, Susan, I would never have chosen this family. You know,
Yeah,
now, now it is a gift. You know,
yeah,
when I was younger, you know, it wasn't, you know, the fight for my own identity and just to define my life, just to have a sense that the family had a personal life,
yeah,
not just a theater life. You know, I suffered a lot in that environment,
yeah.
which was a fantastic environment. Now it's a tremendous gift.
It's a
You
gift
know,
that,
God, yeah, well, God knows what I learned just being
uh,
in that environment. You
it
know,
goes back to what Marty said about an actor's pain is his gift.
well, yeah, you know, what do you have
Yeah.
is life. You know,
And
and I don't understand people. A lot of people seem to be confused about whether being personal is pulling a character down to what's comfortable to you or giving yourself to the character. And a lot of people have difficulty with that. You know, they don't understand that how can you, where is the feeling going to come from if it doesn't come from you?
come from you. Yeah.
But when I was younger, I didn't like myself. I didn't want to be myself. I wanted to be somebody else. And that helped me because I was always seeing the character as and from my point of view. Someone else does the character, they're going to see something else. You know, there isn't an ideal Hamlet that everybody wants to create.
Yeah.
You know, there are, that is what, you know, otherwise you would not put paintings in the museum, you'd put the apple in the museum. But what we really look at is how the artist interprets and expresses his perceptions of life. And I think that acting is exactly the same. And one wants that, you know. Yes, you have to see that Hamlet is, you know, I've never seen a Hamlet that to me was a Prince of Denmark. They always seem English, you know, and I think it's a mistake. You know, it's right in the title,
Right. The title. Yeah.
you know, and you know, yeah, because what is he? Maybe the first Viking prince that doesn't want to go to war. You know, he's not like Fortinbras. You know, he you know, and I go off on this kind of stuff
Yes.
because where I think my work really differentiated from my father is that my love and my focus is not on my production of emotion and feeling, but my analysis of the text. I go off into the play, and this for me is just when I was younger, I thought I was lazy because I would just, you know, daydream and I'd be dreaming about the character. I'd be dreaming about this stuff. And I had no idea that that was part of my work, that I was working because it was just something I did, you know, and it took me years before I realized that, oh no, that's, you know, the dreaming, you know, and if you ask me what I think technique is, I think technique is really dreaming on your feet while you're awake.
That's it.
You
Yeah.
know? I think
Wait,
that's great technique. I think that, and the dreaming is very focused. It's going to be focused on something in the character's world. And this is about script analysis. And that's how I work. And that's what I teach.
When you were saying that, it made me think when I was in reform school, I remember walking down, I was going somewhere, and I was pretending that I was in a commercial, and the camera was in the sky. And I really believed it
Mm.
at the time. I had no idea about acting or anything like that. But I remember when you were talking about imagination, that came to my mind. I really remember that, believing that up in the sky was the camera, and it was for real. I was doing a commercial while I was walking.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think that technique, anything you teach an actor, depends on how much imagination they have and their ability to focus their imagination on something specific. Some people have a lot of imagination, but they can't focus it. And you can't say which one is going to be a better actor because, real success is about who works hardest and doesn't give up. That's, but in terms of the technique that you learn, if someone has a lot of imagination, then the kind of technique they're going to use is different than someone who has less. And it doesn't mean one's going to be a better actor, and I think it's very important for a teacher to be able to um, recognize what each individual needs to learn. Otherwise, you're just teaching a recipe to everybody. And that's not how I work.
Today, we find most of the actors that I see starring in movies I never heard of before. And after that, you never see them again. Years ago, you knew when you went to see a John Wayne movie or whatever, Montgomery Clift, you know, Shelley Winters or whoever it was, they were there. That was good acting. You were going to see talent. Today, I see all these names, and I'm really not impressed with the work that I see today.
I
It's
get I get confused sometimes about who's who.
yeah,
What I do see is that some of them, uh, like Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey, their careers were in trouble. And what they did was they looked at what really good actors do. So they were looking at what, Bobby De Niro does. They were looking at Daniel Day-Lewis. And so they began to do character work, and it rejuvenated their careers and made people think of them as actors, not just as movie stars who were kind of losing their place, because people got tired of them smiling all the time. Uh, and so I can see when some of them work hard, but very often it seems to me as though they're doing it out of their heads and not out of their hearts. It's strange. I mean, if we read back to Socrates and Aristotle, they're complaining about the younger generation too. So probably nothing has changed.
probably you're
you
right.
know, but
Yeah,
but still, it's still I would like to see things that I thought had a little more feeling in it,
yeah,
and wasn't just correct. And some of that, I think comes from the universities. All the power in teaching is no longer in New York. It's in the university programs. And you cannot teach an artistic process academically. You make a major mistake, and they're making a lot of money. And actors come out of those programs owing the bank $250,000. And how are they going to have a career? And what they do sometimes is very competent, but it lacks heart.
mm,
If they're, I say this in humility, but it may not sound that way. But if they're lucky, they'll find me or someone like me,
someone like you. Yeah,
who will actually be able to make them understand that no, it's not just ABC. It's not a recipe.
Yes.
It's not academic. You know, there's more to it. And then maybe the techniques that they've learned can be adjusted and be subservient to the basic artistic process, which is a much more intuitive, spontaneous process.
Uh, who were some of your influences besides your father that you really looked up to in your work?
Well, I'm like anybody else, you know, I can't stop thinking about Marlon. You know, I remember my father talking about greatness. He had an obsession about greatness. And, you know, but one of the things that he said that is that something that's great, sometimes when you see it, you don't recognize it, but you can't stop thinking about it. You know, and it's like going to some restaurant. You remember forever that you ate in this restaurant and you had this thing, you know, and that's a great meal.
Yeah.
You know, and but certainly, you know, I think one of my favorite actors is Montgomery Clift, uh, who, you know, when you look at him, you know, he's not doing anything. He doesn't do what Marlon did. You know, Marlon, you could see a character. You could see him doing, you know, not in a bad way. He when you think about Marlon, you don't think about Marlon. You think about Terry Malloy. You think about Stanley Kowalski. You think about The Godfather. You think about the characters. You don't think about Marlon, which is the difference between a great actor and a great movie. John Wayne is John Wayne. You know, I love John Wayne, but you know that's you know everything is John Wayne, um, and
Montgomery didn't show it though.
yeah, you know it's like if you look at Red River,
Yeah,
you know
that's with John Wayne.
how could this
Yeah,
you know fragile, trembling human being stand up to John Wayne,
yeah,
where even John Wayne believed it. You know, initially John Wayne said, "I don't want to work with that," you know,
yeah.
fucking you know whatever from New York. You know, and at the end of the day, he had enormous respect for him. And you're going, yeah, but if you look at it, you can't say see what he's doing. You just believe it.
Just believe you true. That's a great point. Red River. I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, you know, well, I like in From Here to Eternity. You know, I mean, you know, sometimes even when he's boxing, it's like I'm looking at his body and I'm going, he couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag, you know. But somehow you believe it. I just don't know how he. There's just something happening inside of him that you just believe, and this is what everybody misunderstands or doesn't see clearly enough. You know, that's where the confusion about naturalism and real comes from. You know, because yeah, you watch someone like that, he's not doing anything until you try to do it. You know? But you know, God, you know,
I was thinking about your sister last time I saw her. She was with Lainey Kazan at the studio. She was another gift. You know,
hmm.
she was a beautiful woman.
Yeah, she was. Yeah,
She really was a beautiful woman.
yeah.
She had
She
that
was when she was young.
presence.
She was totally intuitive. I think it bothered my father a little bit. You
You
know.
know.
Yeah, well, she never studied with him. You know, so it's like she just
I
had
didn't
it.
know that she
Oh
was.
yeah, no, she didn't study with him.
Oh,
She came to the studio, but she didn't study in the private classes. You know,
uh,
I mean, well, she started acting. She was like 13. You know, Joe Van Fleet came to the house and pleaded with my parents to let Susan be in a play. My sister wanted to do it. And my parents said no, she's too young. Then Joe Van Fleet asked, and they said yes. Made me mad because it was like, oh, you mean because Joe Van Fleet is a famous actress, it's okay. But if Susan wants to do it, it's not. I was very angry and rebellious. I think I still am, but it's a, um, and she had that intuitive thing which carried her up through Anne Frank, uh, Picnic. She made a film in Europe called Capo, in which she plays um, a Jewish guard in a concentration camp. It's a wonderful movie.
What's the name again?
Capo, Kapo. Yeah, it was directed by Gillo Pontecorvo, who was a wonderful Italian director. He was a communist, so they wouldn't let him into the United States and things like that. But it's a wonderful movie. She resumes Anne Frank in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then moves on. And she just had this quality. I think she lost it after a while. Just that came out of life things and pain, and I think she wanted my father's love and approval, and Marilyn got more, things like that, which really was very pain. I was the boy, so it was easy, and I was rebellious. My sister was never really rebellious, and I think that it damaged her work, where she lost some of her power, uh, and it's sad, because near the end of her life, I thought that I had begun to see her as I remembered her when she was young, but she was sick by then, and she just didn't, it's just, she,
She was a gift.
yeah,
I was truly a fan of hers.
yeah.
I mean, I admired her, and I guess I was in love with her. Many, many, you know, she was such a beautiful woman.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, John, this has been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I'm glad we finally. I'm sorry that I kind of,
Please,
it went out. It just went out of my head for a while, and then I was looking, and the other day, and I went like, oh my God, and I was embarrassed. I
no,
was almost not going to contact you, and then I said, oh come on, John, just tell him you're sorry and
thank
whatever. And if he says to go to hell, it's all right, So
no,
I'm very glad to do it,
you are a gift, John, and I am so flattered that you came on, and really, people will. I just thank you so much, John.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing it, and I'm glad you're around, and take care of yourself, and
You
let's
too.
all
You and
stay
your family,
safe. And
the
you
best.
know, who knows? Someday we may be able to actually meet and touch one another.
Hopefully, that'll be soon. All right, my
Hopefully.
friend. Thank you
I
very
hope.
much.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.